So everyone wants to know what the winner of the Masters is playing, but we've got both approximations of both those in the playoff, Rory and Justin. We're going to talk you through their bags and why they might be different, with Rory being TaylorMade contracted and Justin being out of contract. So we're going to start off with Rory's bag. Now, obviously, Rory's the winner. Grand Slam, legend now, legend status in the game, got the monkey off his back, but what was he using and why? Now, what you'll notice is that I've got a QI10 in the bag. Now, he had been trialling a QI35, but has gone back to the QI10, and it's the core model, but it's a core model plus. So this is a model that they did for the tour players. So Scotty Scheffler was using the same model, I believe still is, and the plus is a slightly lower spin version. So you've got the LS and the core model, and the LS for a lot of the players was a bit too low spin. So because their techniques are so good, the tour players with their angles of delivery and strike patterns, they don't necessarily need the lowest spinning heads out there. But for Rory, the core model was a little bit too high spin, so it's a slight shift in centre of gravity internally, bringing that spin rate down, but keeping that little extra stability that the core model gives you versus the LS, just maintaining that flight. For him, too low spin, gets it knuckling away, and then the dispersion pattern gets away from him. So holding a little bit of spin means straighter ball flight. He's long enough to not need a couple of extra yards, but the core model plus and the QI10 has been working so well for him. It's really hard to get these guys out of a driver that works well, and they haven't quite got it with the QI35 yet. So it'll be fascinating to see whether at some point this year he moves into that. And also got it in just one notch, it's a 9 degree, just one notch lower than standard. So that opens the face slightly, de-loft slightly, just to optimize that ball flight. And shaft-wise, he's in the Ventus Black. Now this is the Velocore Plus. Rory's still playing in the QI10, the original version, Black 6X. Set up 45 inches, D4, so reasonable bit of head weight to it, but not overly heavy. But QI10 core model plus working really well for him there. Going over to Justin's bag, Justin is in a TSR3, Titleist head. So not the current GT, but the TSR. Now, this one happens to be my head. Justin's in the 9 degree, I play the 8. And TSR was very good for ball speed. So that's something that slightly stronger performance that Titleist had really been lacking over the years. That the TSR arrested that. And actually some of the players would prefer the feel of the TSR versus the GT. The noise and the sound changes a little bit, but the spin profile will change a little bit as well. The slightly older model may feel slightly more solid, but just ball speed, spin, flight window, this head being a little bit stronger launching in terms of launch angle versus GT. GT spinning a hair lower. It's likely why Justin stayed in the TSR versus going to GT, but very classic shape. Really kind of compact on a moderate size head, very classic looks and feel, solid feeling head. And then shaft wise, Justin's in the DM on the whiteboard 63 TX. So both in very structurally very stable shafts, tip stable, lower spinning certainly, not necessarily as low launching the whiteboard as the Ventus Black, but strong, really stable shafts for both players and the drivers, but marginally different heads. Into fairway woods, and the QI10 is a consistent theme here for Rory. So QI10, the driver, although slightly kind of tour prototype model, and the standard model, the core model in the fairway as well. Now, part of this is a lot of the tour players like the clean lines of a fixed hosel. Adjustability for us fitters is great, but the tour players like the cleanliness of the line. You save a little bit of mass in the hosel by going glued hosel as well. But the core model for Rory, again, that flight window of up mid launch with a strong spin. He's in the 15 degree in the fairway wood. He did use a QI35 turned down to 13.25 degrees earlier in the year, but back in the QI10 at the Masters. It's a head that has stayed in a lot of tour players' bags. That very good low on the face, good ball speed, nice flight window, just a really stable all-around head. And he uses that in a 3-wood, or used that in a 3-wood and a 5-wood at the Masters. A 3-wood having the Ventus Black. Again, the original model, this is the Velocore Plus, but he's an original series Ventus Black 8X in the 3-wood, but the 9X in the 5-wood. Now, that is a lot of shaft. That's something that we don't see very often. He's such a strong player, that stability, that control, when he's got that much speed into that shorter length in the fairway woods, gives a lot of rigidity and stability. So stops that club head getting away from him and gives that real feeling of consistency and control through impact for him there. Now, I don't have Justin's fairway wood here because Justin is using the M6. Now, this is a really, relatively speaking for a tour player, really old head. We know Tiger used M3, M5 fairway woods for a long time, and Justin's still in the M6. Now, he goes 15 degree 3 wood and then a 21 degree 7 wood, and he is in shaft-wise one of the RDX Smoke Black 80 TX. So both players playing fairly strong weighted fairway wood shafts. M6 was a very good head for again, kind of mid launch and then lower spin. Fairway woods where the players aren't necessarily looking to squeeze every last yard out of them. Once you get ahead, you're comfortable with the flight, the stability, the feel, that trajectory window that the tour players will often talk about. Once you get ahead that fits that, they don't change them very often. It's why you'll see older models in fairway woods across the bag in tour players quite a lot, rather than necessarily just jumping into the latest model. And this is the case for both players. And I say Rory 3 wood 5 wood and Justin going 3 wood 7 wood. In particular at Augusta, the 7 for the height, stopping power into those sort of really small segmented greens where it's really important to know what the ball's going to do when it lands. But M6, this is sort of 6, 7, 8 years old, so plenty of time in the bag for Justin, and that's been a stalwart of his bag over the years for sure. So starting on Justin's irons now, because he's not contracted to a particular brand, he can play whatever the heck he likes. So what we have here is the Miura MC502 and Titleist 620CB. So why is he using these heads? Well, the Miuras are beautifully made, but particularly low offset. Now that's something that the 501s previously had a bit more offset. The 502s have got less offset. A player like Justin will have played very low offset irons for a long time, and that's something that Miura are particularly good at. But what these heads give is a little bit of weight across the bottom, but that muscle bar in the centre. So that solidity of feel, control, whilst gaining just a little bit of playability. Now, it's marginal, but it's a slight gain. Miura, from my standpoint, having played them for 19 odd years, the consistency of launch and spin and ball speed, the feel is like nothing else out there. So something that he's clearly gone to for that. They do have a little bit of a beveled leading edge, which helps a bit of turf interaction, but that gives him essentially the playability of a blade with a little bit of margin of error. And then into the longer irons. Now, the Miura heads, when you go to something more forgiving, go to a slightly different shape. So my assumption here is that the Titleist CB gives a bit more mass across the bottom of the head, a similar soft feel, certainly a very similar beveling and progression to the leading edge, so to for turf interaction, that keeps that offset nice and low, keeps the head size very similar, whilst gaining just a little bit of mass down the bottom of the head. There's no tech progression on these heads, but there's a little bit of mass progression. So rather than gaining ball speed for a faster face, it's just a weight progression side of things, keeping that softer feel. And Justin in his shafts plays the C-tapers in a 125S+. So you're very stable, balanced down the bottom of the shaft, very tip stable. So similar in terms of bend profile to the driver shaft, but balance point much more down the bottom. We can see that from that drill that Justin does to turn and almost leave the club late. That shaft will almost certainly help that delivery pattern and help him square the face up through the ball and drop the club into the back of the ball there. But beautiful set of irons there, and say an interesting combo into the longer irons. And that certainly is the advantage for the player who isn't contracted, is that you can pick and choose what suits you, and say 4 and 5 iron, the Titleist CBs, 6 iron down, the Miuras down to pitch wedge. Switching to Rory's, these are the latest version of what he has. Rory has a prototype blade iron. So it's based more around the 730 from a couple of models back, which is shaped, the center of gravity moved, but the toe shaping, the line, the head, shaped to his preferences, and he plays that in a 5 iron through 9 iron. And then this is the 770 and the 4 iron, but Rory plays the 760. Now, 760 has that bit of a tech progression, so it's got a slightly thinner face, a little bit of ball speed progression, has a center of gravity progression off a blade because you've hollowed out the center, and it's then infilled with that speed foam, softer to tune the sound down, but it has a nice soft frame. The forging of the frame keeps the feel off the face nice and soft. And actually, as a progression off the blade he's using, the differential in feel is going to be minimized whilst putting in a bit of tech. And what the tech gives him is a little bit more ball speed, a little bit more height, a little bit more forgiveness, a little bit more distance. So transitioning from that 4 iron up into the 5 wood, that just means there's as minimal a gap as possible. And then going into his prototype blades, I mean, the purest ball strikers in the world have always stayed with blade. You know, Tiger, Scheffler, Fleetwood, McIlroy, you know, Justin Rose did for a long time. But that gives ultimate control over launch and spin. So that centre ass being high and right at the front, literally on the back of the ball, means that you have particular control, more control than any other head in terms of ball flight and spin and trajectory control. And that was displayed beautifully by a shot on the 15th, that sling around the corner. He was able to get a strong draw onto it, but because the head, the nature of the mass in the head means it retains spin as well. It didn't just knuckle and cannon off the back and down into the water on the 16th. It held the green and gave him that chance of an eagle putt on 15. So moving on to Rory's wedges. Now he goes into the MG4, the mill grind 4 and the wedges. So he plays the 46 degree in the standard bounce, 50 in the standard bounce, 54 in the standard bounce, and the 60 in the low bounce. So, you know, taking these out of the bag, we don't have the 46 here. Rory's are all the raw finish that the tour guys get that we don't at retail. So these are the exact bounces that he uses and sole shapes. So Rory goes to the out of set pitch wedge, essentially the 46. You know, that head from a partial swing point of view just retains a little bit more spin. You know, the face design, the faces are designed to maximize spin and grip and control, and may well find that just the center of gravity in that head he slightly prefers versus the blade, the prototype head of his in the rest of the irons. But for a spin and a flight control and the partial shots, that's likely to be where there's a differential versus the set pitch wedge. So hence, you know, him going into the 46 for that. But you know, once you go into these outer set wedges, you have different face designs. So the milling pattern on the face, the depth of the grooves is specifically designed to grip the ball on those short shots. More so, there is still some milling patterns on the full swing clubs, but specifically different groove shapes into these wedges. Now the main difference, I'll put that 50 degree back in, main difference for his sand wedge and lob wedge is the sole shape. So the standard bounce on his 54 gives him a reasonable bit of bounce on that back edge, which, you know, for a lot of the turfs that he's using, gives him something that gives him quite a bit of bounce that he can really use to kind of bruise into the turf on softer sand, softer pitch shots. He may well go to this to give that little bit more protection, but then goes into the low bounce in his 60, which is actually set to 61. Now, the low bounce in the mill grind 4 is a really nice sole shape. You've got 3 sections to the sole. You've got the beveled leading edge, a flat top, and then a graduated back edge. So you've got 3 points of the head that can help with that turf interaction. But that back edge getting out of the way allows Rory to really zip the club underneath off a tighter lie, or kind of nip underneath. He was really trying to catch it really clean, getting loads of spin and getting really clean, accurate contact with the ball and the turf. So, but he has a progression in bounce that across different lies and different shot types gives him versatility at the bottom end of the bag. Now Rory plays a Project X 6.5 rather than the 7.0s in his 46, 50 and 54, and that goes into a Project X, a specific wedge shaft of theirs, not the set wedge, in the 60 in the 6.5 as well. So it's a slightly softer profile to give a little bit more feel, but it's very, very similar weight. So he goes into something just a little bit more responsive into his highest loft wedge, and say into the raw finish that we don't have for retail. Justin plays the Vokeys in the majority of his. So he plays a 5208, so a very, very neutral grind profile, a 5610S, but then in the 60 goes into a Cleveland. So again, showing that versatility that an out-of-contract player can have. So the interesting thing with the sole shapes is that, taking these ones out, now Justin also played the raw finish. A lot of the tour players like the raw finish because it takes a little bit of the glare off. There's little to no advantage from a spin point of view of the raw heads. It's more just to take any glare out, and then when they grind the sole, if they do any personalization in that respect, it doesn't show. So the whole head retains the same finish. So he plays the standard S grind on the 56. Now a very similar grind to the standard bounce in Rory's 54. So you've got a nice little bit of bounce on the back edge, a little bit of beveling, very, very versatile. More likely to play squarer faced shots with this head. So there's less of a need for that graduated back edge if he opens it up, but a very, very versatile sole shape for standard pitching swings. Then into the Cleveland heads in the RTZs have a little bit more of a rounded sole profile. So for the way that Justin plays the shots, that rounding means it's a sliding through the turf. If you had a more angular sole shape, like some of the Vokey say an M grind has a ridge in the back, it's a flatter front 2/3 and then a ridge and then graduated off. The Clevelands are a little bit more rounded. So for the way that Justin likes to use the bounce and use the sole through the turf, that roundness to the RTZs, I can only assume, but I can assume feels more comfortable in the way that it moves through sand and turf. Whereas that back edge might feel like it kicks a little bit to him, hence going into the Cleveland in the 60 degree. Slightly different milling patterns and face treads, so the feel's going to change a little bit, but again, potentially it's that grind shape. Might be a marginal head shape thing, but I can only assume that the grind in particular, and possibly where that mass is positioned high up the face in the Clevelands, just gives Justin the feel and the control, a little bit of confidence for that club, just something he will feel he gets that little bit extra than playing the vokey in the highest loft. So putter-wise, you've got Rory using the Spider X, and then Justin using a prototype of the Phantom 5 Scotty Cameron. So two quite different setups here. As you'll see from the setups, the neck style's very, very different. So Rory uses the short neck on the TaylorMade. So the short neck means you get more weight sat outside of the line of the shaft, provides more toe hang, and what that does is that delays the closure of the face. So it doesn't, contrary to popular belief, toe hang does not flip the face over. As you accelerate, it actually holds the face open. So that would suggest that Rory would have a tendency to a left miss, so this allows him to be a little bit more aggressive with the stroke and holds the face on line. You've got plenty of stability with the weight at the back, and you've got the pure roll face that TaylorMade do. The Spider being a classic model. The only thing that's different that Rory has that you'll find at retail is the alignment markings. He doesn't have the white true path on there. It's just a completely kind of, essentially it's not unfinished, but it's a stripped back finish. It's a sort of a fired finish where it's more of a kind of matted down raw type finish, but he's got the long sight line through the back there. But otherwise a pretty standard putter. The Spider Tour X has been very, very popular over the years and continues to be because of the visuals and because of that stability of the weight at the back. The Phantom 5 that Justin has, that longer neck gives him face balance, so that reduces any resistance to squaring the face up. It doesn't hold the face on line, but that shaft line intersects more through the center of the face, which is why they hang differently to the short neck. And where Justin uses the claw grip, then he's trying to take out any extraneous influence from the putter, hence using a more torque balance setup in the past, but hence that long neck suits his putting style where he's gone to the claw grip. Where the difference is to the mainstream Phantom 5s is Justin's got a different alignment marking on the top, whereas this has 3 dots on. Justin's has a dot, a line, and a semicircular line onto it. So it's a very, very personal visual alignment key for him. So he's clearly gone into a lot of detail on what his eye sees from an alignment standpoint and the shape and the position on the head, and got that put onto his Scotty Cameron putter. There may well be some very small other changes within the structure of the head in terms of weight positioning, mass properties, but predominantly it's the alignment marks which is the key for Justin's setup versus what you'll be able to find out in the market. So the final piece of kit we can talk about is the golf ball. So Rory using TP5, and Justin using Pro V1X. Now, Rory switched into the TP5 earlier in the year based mainly on short game performance, being able to flight and spin shots the way he really wanted to around the greens. But this also retains just a little bit more spin for his long game, and it wouldn't surprise me if that's also given just a little bit more control with his irons, maybe even the longer part as well, the drive of the fairway. It's a little less of a dipping, flatter flight. Slightly softer feel off this ball as well, but certainly something that Rory really talked about just before the Players when he won at Pebble Beach for earlier in the year, of that just giving him a little bit extra around the greens from a control point of view. And just in the Pro V1X, it's the harder feeling ball, but produces a higher launch and spin. Now actually with some of the shafts and setups, you say, well, they're both the higher spin ball, but they're using low spin shafts. Ultimately the feel and the stability from the shafts is what gives them comfort and control over the shot patterns, but then you can use the ball just to give them that little bit more flight to get that bit of extra spin coming into the greens, and particularly at Augusta this year where there wasn't a lot of wind, unless you were unlucky on, I think it was Friday afternoon, where it got 10 to 15 miles an hour, which is quite testy around there. The higher spin ball just giving that little bit of extra drop and stop, bit more control into the greens. But you'll find a lot of the tour players now playing the slightly higher ball because actually they're looking for that bit of extra control because they're dropping spin elsewhere in the bag from club head design. So higher spin ball on both counts, but clearly Justin preferring the firmer feel of the Pro V1X and Rory the softer feel of the TP5. So I hope you enjoyed that little bit of walkthrough of both Justin and Rory's bags. Obviously, first and second at the Masters, is always nice to dig into what they're using and most importantly why. And we've got a couple of other of those videos. We did one on Scotty Scheffler's bag earlier in the year as well. So if you haven't seen that one, check that out on our YouTube video. But keep posted for any comments and any equipment looks at the players' bags, especially of the upcoming majors, and we'll get that content for you as soon as we can after we know who the winner is.